What's up, my guys? What's up, my girls? Happy and blessed day. I hope this video finds you well. I'm your boy, Danny Flo. This is the Danny Flo podcast where I share my philosophy of life with you, my guys and my girls. It's been about a month, I think, since I recorded an episode. Wanted to make sure I look good for you guys. I went ahead and shaved my head, trimmed my beard, lined up my neck beard. For some reason, there's some people that think that God doesn't have a sense of humor. It's totally false because I can't grow a head on my head or my patchy beard, but I can grow it on my neck. Go figure. Why do I need hair down here but not up here? I don't know. One of the many things I'm gonna ask Jesus if he lets me into heaven, which is pretty questionable right now. Anyways, my guys and my girls, after you watch this video and you've decided whether you like it or not, go ahead and like it, whether that's on YouTube or my IGTV channel. Turn on post notifications on IGTV or hit the bell for post notifications on YouTube. I think they're called the same thing. Cerebral flatulence. What are you gonna do? Anyways, my guys and my girls, I wanted to talk to you today about the first Hispanic-Conservative value. We are in an election year, so this is one of those years, election time, one of those moments, I guess, where people get a little bit more political than they typically would. Usually because conservatives characterize liberalism as dangerous and liberals characterize conservatism as dangerous as well. So basically people that are conservative like myself will get on Instagram or Facebook or wherever and say, well, you've got to vote for the more conservative candidate because the liberal ideology is dangerous, and vice versa. The liberals will get on Instagram, YouTube, wherever, and they say, we've got to vote for the liberal candidate because the conservative candidate is dangerous. And in both cases, right, that's just like a caricature of what actually happens, right? It's just a simplification of what actually happens. Most things in life are a lot more nuanced, right? There's a context to things, right? There are some things that are black and white, I've got to say, because if this isn't your first time, then you guys know that I'm a religious Catholic, so Catholicism comes with some dogmas and some infallible teaching that I assent to intellectually, even if I don't completely understand. So those things are black and white for me. But there are other things that aren't black and white that are, I guess, gray. There's a lot more nuance. It's multifaceted. It's more complicated. And not just conservatism, right, but being Hispanic and being conservative is multifaceted, complicated. There's a lot of nuance to it, right? And why am I talking about it? I think I just kind of alluded to it a little bit. We're in an election year, so just people in general just get more political than not because they have this fear, right? If the liberal candidate wins, then my life is over, right? And then liberals have the same thing. Like if the conservative candidate wins, then our life is over, right? It's basically going to be hell on earth. But is it really like that? Maybe, maybe not. But I wanted to share my perspective, right? Because I'm a lot of things that I can't control, but being conservative is one of the things that I can control. I could be more libertarian, right? Or I could be more liberal, right? But I choose not to be. I didn't choose to be born, number one. I didn't choose to be born in America. I didn't choose to have Mexican parents. I was actually raised Catholic, but I didn't choose that. There's just a bunch of things that I didn't get to choose. But I think one of the misconceptions is that since President Donald Trump is Republican and typically conservatives vote Republican, that some of the things that he said would discourage Hispanics or Mexicans or Latinos to vote Republican because that they are conservative, right? So in 2015, when he announced his presidential candidacy, he said that when Mexico sends over his people, which is a really weird way to put it because I don't think Mexico is sending over people. I think some Mexicans, through their own volition, decide to come over here, and a lot of times it is illegally, right? They cross over illegally, and that's just with respect to the law. I'm gonna go on a tangent real quick. So a lot of times people post things on Instagram that say no human is illegal, which is a straw man of the actual argument, because people who don't agree with illegal immigration aren't saying that these people don't belong on Earth, don't belong on planet Earth, right? They're just saying that they don't have a right to break the laws of a sovereign country. So they're not saying, you don't belong here, go to Mars or something. They're just saying, hey, you shouldn't break into the country. So that's that, for whatever that's worth. Some people are not going to agree with that either, but whatever, you can't make everyone happy. So like I was saying, he said when Mexico sends over his people, like I said, Mexico's not sending over anyone. Mexico is just, some people are coming over here from Mexico. He said they're rapists, they're murderers, and they're drug dealers. They're not sending their best, and some of them I assume are good people. And because he called some Mexicans rapists, murderers, and drug dealers, no one heard and I assume some are good people. And maybe they did hear, but they don't care. They just decided to just hang on to the first part. So because he said that, then they think, oh, well, there you have it. No Hispanic in their right mind, no Mexican, no Latino in their right mind would vote for Donald Trump, or would vote for any Republican, or would even consider themselves conservative or right-leaning or anything like that. But again, that's a simplification. That's a caricature. That's a reduction of how multifaceted, how complicated most things are. So the reason, I mean, I can't speak, I'm not a spokesman for every Hispanic, I'm not a spokesman for every Mexican, I'm not a spokesman for every Latino, right? Because that would also be reducing a complicated issue. There are definitely Hispanics that are liberal or libertarian, Mexicans that are liberal or libertarian, and Latinos that are libertarian or liberal, right? So, but I am not. And why is that? Well, I wanted to talk about the first Hispanic conservative value and why it's the first Hispanic and conservative value. And I want to do it in 3 ways. So, first and foremost, right? My parents are Mexican, so I've done a little bit of research on Mexican history, nothing in depth. And then I'm a religious Catholic, so I've done a little bit of research on the history of Catholicism, right? And those two things intersect. Why? Because in the past, at one point, Mexico was one of the top 3 Catholic countries. I think they're still in the top. I just don't think that they're in the top 3. But the majority of the population in Mexico wasn't always Catholic, right? Before, they were also religious, but they were religious pagans, which means they had multiple deities or multiple gods, right? And then after 1531, something happened, something very important happened, and they became religious Catholics. And if we fast forward to 2020, right, and in previous decades, they haven't been as religious about their Catholicism as in previous decades. They've been more cultural about their Catholicism, which means the religion became part of the culture. And once it becomes parts of the culture, right, the explanation and the original intent is lost, and it just becomes almost like a sacred cow. Like it's just something that you do because it's what we do. So Mexicans have always been religious. When we were Aztecs, we had multiple deities. In 1531, with the apparition of the Virgin Mary to Juan Diego, she requested that Juan Diego asked the bishop to build a church so that the Mexicans could convert to Christianity, specifically Catholicism, and they would worship Jesus Christ in that church, right? Juan Diego did what he was asked. The bishop didn't believe him, asked for proof. Juan Diego told the Virgin Mary that the bishop wanted proof. He said, go to the hill of Tepeyac. You'll find your proof there. He found some roses. It was during the winter. Roses don't grow in the winter. He thought that was the proof. He put it in his tilma, which is kind of like a poncho, a little bit, right? He took it to the bishop. When he showed the roses to the bishop, it wasn't just the roses there. It was an image of the Virgin Mary, and that's the famous image that a lot of Mexicans wear on a necklace, or they'll wear it imprinted on a shirt, or they'll have an image of it on their car. Sometimes I actually have a tattoo of it. You can't tell, right? Because if I took my shirt off, my muscles wouldn't fit on the screen because I'm really swole. This is one of the problems I have. And so a lot of people, because they see that image a lot, they think that we worship Mary. We don't worship Mary. We just respect her because she converted us from pagans to Christians, right? And so the first Hispanic conservative value is God and worshiping God both privately and publicly, right? We've been religious for so long, right? Our people have always had a sense, an intuition that there is something bigger than us, right? We see a purpose and a meaning in the world. Before, we used to express that through our religious paganism. We converted because of a supernatural event, right? Specifically to Catholicism, right? We were religiously Catholic for a long time. It's even built into our language. Like when we say adios, that doesn't just mean bye or goodbye. It means to God or go with God. It's built into our language. In the year 1926, the Mexican government put into place a lot of anti-clerical laws, which means that they were laws targeting Catholic priests, right? And it basically made the public practice of Catholicism illegal, right? The Mexican laity, right, they didn't accept that. They started a war against the government for their right to worship God publicly, right? In an act of defiance against these anti-clerical laws that basically made Catholicism illegal. So some of us haven't forgotten that, right? We don't want to live in a country that has laws against God and the public and private worship of God. And I think if we're being honest, unfortunately, we have a binary option, right? If you're conservative, you tend to vote Republican. If you're liberal, you tend to vote Democrat. If you're libertarian, some libertarians vote Republican, some of them vote Democrat, right? Libertarians are seen more centrist, right? Instead of right or left. I got my rights and my left all mixed up because I'm looking into a screen. You know how it is. I received a public education. That's all I'm going to say about that. And so I think if we're being honest, right, God and the public and private worship of God is found in conservatism, right? If it were found in both on both sides, in conservatism and liberalism, then more Hispanics and Mexicans would probably be the majority, would be liberal. Did I say that right? If it were found in both, then it wouldn't matter to me. Well, that with that issue, it wouldn't matter to me. But if we're being honest, that's just not how it is. So, because that is the most important issue for a person like me that's a religious Catholic, right? Because I don't want what happened in Mexico to happen in the United States. I don't want the government to come down with anti-clerical laws, anti-Catholic laws where I can only worship God in my head and in my heart, but then publicly I have to say that I don't, right? That obviously would cause conflict between, internally, right, in my conscience. Not only that, but I don't want that for other people as well, right? So that is the first Hispanic conservative value. Historically, we've always been religious. We were pagan Aztecs, then we were religious Catholics. Now we're more culturally Catholic, but for those of us who are still religiously Catholic, we remember our history, and we remember that our own government, the government from the country that our parents eventually, and by the time our parents came to the United States, the Cristero War from 1926 to 1929 was over, but the good Mexican parents should have learned this part of their history and should have taught it to their kids, and we don't want that to happen. We don't want that to happen here, right? And if you watched my previous podcast episodes, you probably know that I'm a Fulton Sheen fan. Well, I don't know this quote verbatim, but Fulton Sheen talks about how if religious people try to not meddle in issues that are typically associated with the state or the government, right, they're going to be unpleasantly surprised that the state and the government doesn't mind meddling in issues that are typically seen associated with religion or morality or faith and things like that. And we actually have a historical example: Mexico, 1926, 1929, the Cristero War. So think about that, my guys and my girls, especially if you're a Hispanic, a Mexican, a Latino, right? And especially if you consider yourself a liberal, right? They're not trying to conserve your right to worship God, private and publicly, right? Now that doesn't mean that as a conservative we want the federal government to make all 50 states be Catholic, right? We just don't want them to prevent us, right? We don't think it's any of their business whether we worship and express our religion, not just privately but publicly, right? And worst case scenario, the same thing would happen as the Cristero War. So food for thought, my guys and my girls. I hope you enjoyed the video. Go ahead and like it. Definitely share it so that other people can tell me how wrong I am. Until then, my guys and my girls, I love you. And remember what Venerable Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen taught us: your life is worth living. Bye.